never thought I'd be posting something like this, but here we go. This happened last year, during my first semester at college. I moved into a dorm that was supposed to be newly renovated. Honestly, it looked nice. Clean walls, new furniture. But there was this vibe. You know, the kind that makes your skin crawl like something's off. Anyway, it was my first night there. My room was on the 3rd floor, and the whole building was pretty empty. Most students stayed in the newer dorms closer to campus, but I got stuck here because of some housing mix-up. Lucky me, right? So there I was, unpacking my stuff, trying to make the room feel a little more like home. Around midnight, just as I was getting ready to crash, I heard this soft knock on my door. At first I thought maybe it was a neighbor, but when I opened the door, no one was there. I figured it was just nerves, new place, late at night, whatever. But then it happened again, and again. Each time I opened the door faster, trying to catch whoever it was, but the hallway was completely empty. I even stuck my head out to check both ends, but there wasn't a soul in sight. By the 3rd knock, I started to feel weird. Like my heart wasn't racing from fear exactly, but more like my body was trying to warn me about something. I decided to ignore it and went to bed. The next day, I mentioned the knocks to a girl I met in the dining hall. She laughed it off, saying it was probably just someone playing pranks. "This dorm's old," she said, "but don't worry, nothing's haunted here." That should have made me feel better, but it didn't. Later that night, I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone when I heard it again. Not knocking this time. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. They started faint, coming from the far end of the hallway, and got louder, closer. My stomach turned to knots. I sat up, holding my breath, straining to hear. Then they stopped, right outside my door. I froze. My mind was screaming at me to do something, anything, but my body wouldn't move. When I finally got the nerve to peek through the peephole, the hallway was empty. I opened the door a crack, just enough to look around. That's when I saw it. At the end of the hallway, where the dim emergency light barely reached, there was something. A shadow, maybe. It didn't look like a person, more like a shape. Before I could make sense of it, it moved, fast. It darted down the stairs and out of sight. I slammed my door shut and locked it, my heart pounding like a drum. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I tried telling someone, a guy from my English class who lived on the 1st floor. He gave me this weird look and said, "Dude, no one's even on your floor. They're still renovating most of it." That's when it hit me. Whoever, or whatever, I saw wasn't supposed to be there. I wish I could say I moved out right then and there, but no. Stupid me decided to stick it out. I convinced myself it was just my imagination, or maybe some maintenance worker pulling a late-night shift. That made sense, right? The 3rd night is when things got real. It started the same way. I was in my room trying to study when the knocks came back. This time they were louder, more forceful. I wasn't going to let it mess with me again, so I ignored it. Big mistake. The knocks turned into banging. I swear it felt like the whole door was shaking. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to stand up and check. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob. When I opened it, the hallway was pitch dark. The motion sensor lights were off, even though they were supposed to turn on automatically. That's when I saw them. Handprints, clear as day, pressed against the window at the end of the hall. Here's the thing. My floor was on the 3rd story. Unless someone had a ladder and a death wish, there was no way those prints were from a person. I slammed the door and locked it, my chest heaving. My room felt smaller, the air heavier. It was like the walls were closing in. Then came the sound. It wasn't footsteps this time. It was a laugh. Soft, raspy, and way too close. It started outside my door and echoed down the hallway. I grabbed my phone and called the campus security office. The guard on the other end sounded half asleep. "Probably just a prank," he said. "I'll send someone to check it out." An hour passed. No one came. The next day, I was done pretending everything was fine. I needed answers. I started asking around about the dorm. Most people shrugged it off, but one guy, Chris, he was an older student, paused when I brought it up. "You're in Wilbur Hall?" he asked, his face serious. "Yeah, why?" He leaned in, lowering his voice like we were in some cheesy horror movie. "They don't talk about it much, but a few years ago, a girl disappeared from that dorm. Rachel something, they never found her." My throat tightened. "What happened?" "No one knows," Chris said. "She was last seen on the 3rd floor, though. Same as you." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Rachel, the 3rd floor, the handprints. It all lined up, but it didn't make sense. Around midnight, the knocks came again. This time I didn't freeze. I grabbed a flashlight and swung the door open. Empty. I stepped out into the hallway, my heart racing, and followed the sound of faint shuffling steps. They led me to the bathroom at the end of the corridor. The lights flickered as I stepped inside, and a chill ran down my spine. The stalls were all open except for one. The last stall door was closed, and I could see boots, black, scuffed boots, peeking out from under the door. "Hello?" I called, my voice shaky. No answer. I inched closer, gripping my flashlight like it was a weapon. My pulse thundered in my ears. I pushed the stall door open. It was empty. Then, out of nowhere, that same raspy laugh echoed around me. Louder this time, closer. The room felt like it was spinning, and I bolted. I didn't stop running until I was back in my room, locking the door behind me. I sat there for hours, clutching my flashlight, refusing to sleep. I was done. Whatever was happening wasn't just in my head, and I was going to find out the truth. The next day, I couldn't focus on anything. Classes, friends, even eating. It all felt like background noise. My mind was locked on Rachel and what I'd seen in that bathroom. When I got back to my room that afternoon, I noticed something weird. My closet door was open. Not just a crack, it was wide open. I hadn't touched it. I walked over cautiously, every step making my chest tighter. Inside, everything looked normal. Clothes, shoes, the usual. But when I moved some boxes around, I found something wedged under the floorboards. A notebook. The cover was dusty and worn, but the name Rachel was written on the inside in faded ink. My heart sank. This was her journal. Flipping through the pages, I felt like I was invading her privacy, but I couldn't stop. Her entry started off normal. Classes, friends, complaints about the dorm food. Then, halfway through, things got dark. She wrote about hearing noises at night, knocks on her door, and footsteps in the hallway. Exactly what I'd been experiencing. Her last entry stopped me cold. "They won't leave me alone. I see them in the hallway now, watching me. I think they want me to join them. I'm so scared." Join them? Who was she talking about? My stomach twisted as I reread that line. Whatever happened to Rachel wasn't random, and now it was happening to me. That night I made a plan. I wasn't going to run anymore. I was going to end this. I set my alarm for midnight, grabbed Rachel's journal, and headed to the bathroom. My flashlight shook in my hand as I walked the dark hallway. When I got to the bathroom, it was colder than usual, like the air had been sucked out of the room. The lights flickered as I opened the door. I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing. The last stall was closed again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I walked right up to it and pushed the door open. Nothing. But as I turned to leave, the door slammed shut behind me and the raspy laugh filled the room again. Louder, angrier. "Rachel," I shouted, clutching the journal. "I know what happened to you. Tell me how to stop this." For a moment, the room went completely silent. Then in the mirror, fog began to form, spelling out a single word. "Remember." I didn't understand at first, but then it hit me. Rachel wasn't the only one this had happened to. She was trying to warn me, warn all of us. I flipped through her journal, reading the entries aloud, calling out whoever or whatever was behind this. The room shook, the lights flickered, and then silence. The air grew warm again. The heavy, oppressive feeling lifted, and for the first time in days I felt like I could breathe. The next morning I packed my things and moved out. I couldn't stay there, not after everything. But before I left, I slid Rachel's journal under my bed, hoping it would help the next person who ended up there. So yeah, that's my story. I still don't know what exactly was haunting that dorm or why it targeted me. Maybe it was Rachel's spirit. Maybe it was something worse. But if you ever hear knocks in the middle of the night or see handprints where they shouldn't be, do yourself a favor. Don't ignore them. Trust me, you don't want to find out what happens next. Hey guys, Gabriel here. I never thought I'd end up telling this story to anyone, let alone on YouTube, but here we are. Halloween week at college is usually full of dumb pranks and bad decisions, but this was something else. It started during a party in the dorms. You know the type: loud music, cheap beer, and way too many people crammed into one space. I wasn't even planning to stay long, but then she walked in. You know that one person who makes you forget how to talk? For me, that was Sarah. Long story short, my friends decided to show off by daring me to sneak into the old library at the edge of campus. This wasn't just any library. It was abandoned years ago after a fire gutted the place. People whispered about creepy stuff happening there. Missing students, ghost sightings, you name it. Normally, I'd pass, but Sarah was watching, so I said, why not? Worst decision ever. Later that night, I found myself standing in front of the old library, freezing my ass off. The place looked straight out of a horror movie. Broken windows, vines creeping up the walls, and an eerie fog rolling in. The front doors were chained shut, but I spotted a busted window low enough to climb through. The inside was even worse. Dusty shelves stood like skeletons in the dim light. Broken furniture was scattered everywhere, and the air smelled like burnt wood and mildew. I pulled out my phone to use as a flashlight, and that's when I heard it. A faint creak like someone stepping on old floorboards. I froze. It's probably nothing, I told myself. Just the building settling or something. But the noise came again, louder this time. My gut was telling me to bail, but curiosity got the better of me. I followed the sound, deeper into the library, until I found a staircase leading to the basement. Okay, so the basement? Bad idea. Really bad idea. It was pitch black, but I could make out faint scorch marks on the walls. In the corner of the room, there was a small, locked cabinet that looked untouched by the fire. Naturally, I had to see what was inside. I mean, who wouldn't? I found a crowbar nearby and managed to pop it open. Inside was a book, old, leather-bound, and covered in strange symbols. It had this creepy vibe, like it didn't want to be touched. But of course, being the genius that I am, I picked it up and flipped it open. The pages were filled with bizarre drawings and Latin text I couldn't understand. One page had a warning scrawled in red ink. Do not read aloud. Guess what I did next? Yup, I read a few lines out loud. The room went dead silent, like someone had pressed pause on the world. Then came the sound. Heavy, deliberate footsteps above me. I panicked and slammed the book shut. The footsteps were getting closer, and I could hear this weird, low humming, like chanting. I shoved the book back in the cabinet and bolted up the stairs. That's when I saw it. A tall figure at the end of the hallway, holding a flickering lantern. Its face was hidden under a hood, but I could feel its eyes on me. I ducked into a side room, heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode. The figure was moving now, its lantern casting eerie shadows on the walls. It stopped outside the room I was hiding in, and for a moment I thought it would leave. Then the door creaked open. I didn't wait to see who or what it was. I darted past the figure and sprinted toward the main floor, but every door I tried was locked. It was like the building itself didn't want me to leave. The figure was chasing me now, its footsteps echoing louder and faster. Desperate, I remembered the window I climbed through. I ran for it, but something yanked me back, like an invisible force pulling me by my shirt. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my lighter, and flicked it on. I set the book's page in my hand on fire and threw it at the figure. The force let go, and the figure let out this inhuman scream that still haunts me. I smashed through the window, landing in a pile of trash outside. My knees were scraped and my hands were bleeding, but I didn't care. I was free. I looked back just in time to see the hooded figure standing at the window, watching me with that lantern in its hand. When I got back to the dorm, my friends were waiting for me, laughing like it was all some big joke. But when I told them what happened, their faces went pale. One of them pulled up an article online about the library. Apparently the fire wasn't an accident. It was caused during some kind of ritual in the book I found. Yeah, it was mentioned in the report. The creepiest part? This morning I found a scrap of that burnt page in my backpack, even though I left it behind. So yeah, if you're ever dared to do something stupid, take my advice, don't. Some places are abandoned for a reason. Hey everyone, let me tell you about one of the craziest nights of my life. It's not something I talk about much, but I figure it's finally time to share. You know those urban legends about secret societies on college campuses? Yeah, well, I lived one of those stories, unfortunately. It all started when Megan, my best friend and a journalism major, came rushing into our dorm room, practically glowing with excitement. "Alex, have you heard about the Order?" she asked, waving some crumpled flyer she found taped to a lamppost. The Order, apparently, was this underground society that hosted these insane midnight gatherings in an abandoned building on campus. Supposedly, no one who'd gone in ever talked about it afterward. Sounds like some wannabe cult crap. Ryan, my roommate, chimed in from his desk. He was knee-deep in his history notes, as always. Megan wasn't having it. "Think about it. What if we could uncover some big story, expose them or something?" she argued. I wanted to brush it off, but the truth was, I was curious. I mean, who wouldn't be? So after way too much back and forth, we decided we'd check it out. Megan found a way to get fake invites, don't ask me how. And Ryan, the skeptic, agreed to tag along, just to prove us wrong. The night of the big adventure, we made our way to this sketchy part of campus. The building looked like it hadn't seen a repair crew since the 1950s. The windows were boarded up, but the faint glow of candles spilled out from cracks in the wood. Inside, it was like stepping into some twisted movie scene. People were wearing masks, think Phantom of the Opera, but creepier, and murmuring to each other in low voices. The walls were covered in strange symbols, and the air smelled like burnt herbs or incense or something weird. I stuck close to Megan, who had her phone out like she was ready to record at any second. Ryan was less subtle. "This is ridiculous," he whispered. "They're probably just theater majors pulling a prank." A man in a black robe approached us. He was tall, his mask more elaborate than the others, and his voice was deep and commanding. "Welcome, initiates," he said, his eyes scanning us like he could see right through our disguises. "The ceremony is about to begin. Follow me." We followed him into a large, dimly lit room. Rows of people stood in a circle around a platform in the center, where a table was set up with bizarre-looking artifacts. I caught sight of a chalice, a dagger, and what looked like an old book with a leather cover. Megan squeezed my arm. "We're so dead," she whispered. "All right, so this is where things really started to spiral out of control." We stood there, blending in as best we could, while this whole bizarre ritual unfolded. The guy in the robe, who I'm guessing was their leader, started talking about unlocking power through unity, or something equally cryptic. Everyone around us was nodding like it all made perfect sense. Then, out of nowhere, two people in masks dragged someone up onto the platform. This guy wasn't in costume. He looked like a regular college student, terrified out of his mind. They made him kneel, and the leader started chanting in some language I couldn't even begin to recognize. That's when Megan lost it. "Alex, we have to do something," she whispered, clutching my arm so tightly I thought she'd cut off my circulation. But what were we supposed to do? We were outnumbered, unarmed, and way too deep into this mess. The leader held up the chalice, and the crowd started chanting along with him. I didn't understand a single word, but the sound of it made my stomach churn. Then, the guy on the platform collapsed. Just like that. No warning, no explanation. He dropped like a puppet with its strings cut. Ryan grabbed both of us. "We're leaving now." We tried to slip out unnoticed, but of course, nothing ever goes that smoothly. As soon as we moved toward the door, one of the masked people stepped into our path. Initiates must stay until the ceremony is complete, they said in this monotone voice that sent chills down my spine. Ryan didn't even hesitate. He shoved the guy aside and bolted. Megan and I followed, heart pounding, but the exit was blocked. A group of them stood in front of the door, forming a wall of masks and robes. That's when Megan spotted a door at the back of the room. "Over there," she hissed. We made a break for it, darting through the shadows while the chanting grew louder behind us. The door led to a staircase spiraling down into a basement that smelled like damp earth and mildew. The basement was even creepier than the room upstairs. The walls were lined with shelves full of old books, jars of weird-looking stuff and artifacts that looked like they belonged in a museum, or maybe a horror movie. As we moved further in, I noticed a table covered in papers. Megan, being Megan, immediately started digging through them. "These are missing person reports," she whispered, her voice trembling. She held up a photo of a girl who'd gone missing 2 years ago. Then I saw it. In the center of the room, on a pedestal, was this thing. It looked like a small black box, covered in glowing symbols that seemed to shift and writhe under the dim light. I reached out to touch it, don't ask me why, and as soon as my fingers grazed it, the symbols flared brightly. Megan smacked my hand away. "What are you doing?" she hissed. But before I could answer, we heard footsteps on the stairs. Someone was coming. The footsteps were getting louder. Megan froze, clutching the papers she'd grabbed, and Ryan started looking around for another way out. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might give us away. Whoever was coming down the stairs wasn't in any rush. They knew we were trapped. "We need to hide," Ryan whispered. But there wasn't much to work with, just shelves and dusty furniture. Megan pointed toward a pile of crates in the corner. "There," she whispered urgently. We scrambled behind them just as the basement door creaked open. A robed figure entered, holding a lantern that cast these long, creepy shadows across the walls. I held my breath, trying not to make a sound, but my mind was racing. Were they going to find us? Drag us back upstairs? Worse? The figure walked slowly around the room, stopping right in front of the pedestal with the glowing box. They muttered something under their breath, like a prayer or chant, and the symbols on the box flickered. For a second I thought they were about to leave, but then they turned toward the crates. My stomach dropped. They were coming right for us. But just as they took a step forward, there was a loud crash from upstairs. The figure paused, then hurried back up the stairs to check it out. "Now's our chance," Ryan said, already pulling Megan toward the staircase. I followed, clutching the glowing box for reasons I still can't explain. It felt important. We made it back upstairs, but the house was in chaos. People were running, shouting, and the chanting had turned into this eerie, echoing hum. We slipped through the crowd and found a broken window in the corner of one room. Without thinking twice, we climbed out and ran as fast as we could, not stopping until we were far away from the building. Back at my dorm, we sat in stunned silence. Megan was flipping through the missing person reports she'd grabbed, her hands shaking. This is real," she said. "People have been disappearing for years, and it's connected to them." Ryan shook his head. "No one's going to believe us," he said. "We have no proof." He wasn't wrong. Megan's phone had been smashed in the chaos, and all the photos and videos she'd taken were gone. "We have to tell someone," Megan insisted. "The police, the campus board, anyone." But Ryan wasn't budging. "And what happens when they come after us?" He shot back. "You saw what they're capable of." I stayed quiet, staring at the glowing box on my desk. The symbols were still shifting, almost hypnotically. I didn't know what it was, but it felt like the kind of thing that people would do anything to protect, or to get back. In the end, we made a decision. No cops, no board, no one. We agreed to destroy the reports, ditch the box, and pretend none of it ever happened. It was safer that way. Or at least, that's what we told ourselves. A few weeks passed, but none of us were the same. Megan dropped her journalism project entirely, which was so unlike her. Ryan stopped arguing with her about it too, which was even weirder. As for me, I started having these dreams. In them, I was back in that basement, staring at the glowing box. But in the dreams, the symbols weren't just glowing. They were talking to me, whispering things I couldn't quite understand. But they always left me waking up in a cold sweat. One night I woke up to find the box on my desk even though I'd thrown it into the river weeks ago. It was glowing brighter than ever. And then, I heard it. The hum. The same eerie hum from the ritual, faint but unmistakable, coming from the hallway outside my room. I don't know what it all means or why it's still happening, but I can tell you one thing. If you ever hear about some secret society or underground club that sounds too creepy to be real, don't go looking for it. Trust me, some things are better left in the dark. Hey guys, it's Ryan here. I thought I'd share something with you that still gives me chills to this day. You know, sometimes life throws you these opportunities that seem too good to pass up. That's exactly what happened to me last summer, when I was still at Stanford struggling to make ends meet. So here's the deal. I'd been applying for internships like crazy. I had a decent LinkedIn profile and a solid GPA, but nothing was sticking. Then one day, out of nowhere, I got an email from this startup called Neural Ventures. Ever heard of it? Yeah, me neither. Anyway, they offered me an interview. It sounded perfect. Big perks, flexible hours, and they said they loved my profile. The contact person was someone named Emily Hayworth. The weird thing? When I Googled her, I found almost nothing. Same with the company. A few vague mentions here and there, but no website or social media. Still, the offer seemed legit, and let's be honest, I was desperate. Emily told me to meet her at this co-working space in Palo Alto. Fancy, right? I thought maybe I'd finally caught a break, so the big day comes and I'm pumped. I put on my one interview-worthy outfit and head out. When I got to the address Emily gave me, my stomach dropped. The building was completely locked up, lights off, no one around. I thought, great, I've been scammed. But then my phone buzzes. It's Emily. She tells me to wait in the parking lot behind the building and she'll pick me up. A few minutes later, this sleek black Tesla pulls up, and out steps Emily. She's got this sharp blazer, sunglasses, like someone straight out of The Wolf of Wall Street. But something about her felt off. She was way too confident, like she'd been expecting me to be skeptical but didn't care. She invites me to sit in the car. Now I know what you're thinking, big red flags, right? But at the time, I convinced myself it was fine. I mean, successful people do weird things, right? So I got in. The inside of the Tesla was spotless, almost sterile, like no one actually used it. Emily started talking, asking me the usual questions, what I studied, my skills, my goals. But then she shifted. Her questions got weird. Stuff like, do you trust technology to always do the right thing? And how far would you go for progress? At this point, my gut was screaming, but I didn't want to seem rude. Then she handed me this small metallic device. It looked like a cross between a USB drive and a tiny antenna. Hold this for a second, she said, smiling. I did, and the moment it touched my hand, I felt this faint vibration, like it was alive. My vision got a little blurry, and my head started to spin. I handed it back quickly, saying, "That's interesting." She just nodded like I'd passed some kind of test. I tried to play it cool, but honestly, I was spooked. Emily smiled like she had me exactly where she wanted. Then she leaned in and said, "Ryan, at Neural Ventures, we're pushing the boundaries of what's possible. We need people like you, visionaries willing to test the limits." She talked about some cutting-edge tech, but her words were slippery, like they were hiding something. "What exactly do you guys do?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Emily paused, like she was deciding how much to say. "We specialize in predictive algorithms, but let's just say we're exploring how to integrate them directly with human intuition. It's revolutionary." That didn't sound right. I mean, what even is human intuition integration? She handed me the metallic device again and said, "This is a prototype. It's harmless, but it lets us gather important data." Harmless? Yeah, sure. I didn't buy it. When I told her I needed more time to think, she smiled that fake knowing smile. Take your time, Ryan, but remember, opportunities like this don't come around often. She opened the car door for me, her politeness almost mocking. We'll be in touch. As soon as I stepped out of the car, my instincts screamed, run, but I didn't, not yet. I walked away calmly, pretending everything was fine, but my brain was on fire trying to piece it all together. What had I just gotten myself into? It wasn't long before things went from weird to full-on terrifying. As I left the parking lot, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. I turned back, and sure enough, Emily's Tesla was slowly creeping behind me, like a predator stalking its prey. I picked up my pace, pretending I didn't notice. Then I heard the car door slam. My heart raced as I glanced back and saw another figure stepping out of the Tesla, a tall man in a black hoodie. He was holding something that looked like a tablet, but it was glowing faintly, almost like it was scanning the air. That's when I knew I had to run. I bolted down the sidewalk, weaving through people, my breath coming in sharp bursts. Behind me, I heard the Tesla's engine roar as it started following me. It wasn't speeding, just tailing me, slow and steady, like they knew I couldn't outrun them forever. I turned into an alley, hoping to lose them. Big mistake. The alley was a dead end, with only a rusty fire escape leading up to an old apartment building. The Tesla pulled up to the mouth of the alley, headlights flooding the space. The man with the tablet got out and started walking toward me. Panic took over. I scrambled up the fire escape, my hands shaking as I gripped the cold metal rails. Below me, the man stood still, looking up at me with this eerie calm, like he wasn't even trying to catch me. He just held up the tablet, and I swear I heard this faint hum like the thing was doing something. I didn't stick around to find out what. I climbed all the way to the roof and hid behind an air conditioning unit, my chest heaving. I stayed there for what felt like hours. When I finally peeked over the edge, the Tesla was gone. But that wasn't the end of it, not even close. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily's smile, that glowing tablet, the Tesla creeping through the streets. By morning, I knew I had to figure out what was going on. Whatever Neural Ventures was, it wasn't just a normal startup. I started digging online, this time deeper than before. I combed through forums, obscure tech blogs, and even some dark web threads I probably shouldn't have clicked on. That's when I found it. A few scattered posts from people who claimed they'd been contacted by the same company. Their stories were all eerily similar. Vague job offers, strange interviews, and devices like the one Emily had shown me. But the scariest part? A couple of them mentioned feeling different afterward, like their thoughts weren't entirely their own anymore. One guy had written, "It's like they planted something in my head. I can't prove it, but I know they're watching me." That hit me hard. I thought about the device Emily made me hold and that strange vibration I felt. Could it have done something to me? The more I thought about it, the more I noticed little things. My phone felt hotter than usual. My laptop was slower, like it was being tapped. And then there were the emails, random cryptic messages from unknown senders, asking questions like, "Do you feel safe?" and "What's your next move?" At that point, I knew I couldn't stay quiet. I had to do something. But what could I do? Go to the cops? What would I even tell them? "Hi, I think some mysterious tech company might have hacked my brain." Yeah, that'd go over well. Then, right as I was about to shut my laptop and give up, I got another email. It was from Emily. No subject, just a single sentence. "You shouldn't have looked." That email broke me. My hands shook as I stared at the screen, every instinct screaming at me to delete it and pretend none of this ever happened. But I couldn't. I felt trapped, like they already had me in their grip and there was no escape. I packed a bag and left my apartment, hoping I could just disappear for a while. I drove for hours, no destination in mind, just trying to outrun the paranoia. But no matter where I went, the feeling followed me. Every car that passed made my stomach flip. Every shadow felt like someone watching. Then, late that night, I stopped at a motel off the highway. It was one of those dingy places with flickering neon signs and peeling wallpaper. I thought maybe I could finally breathe, just for a moment. But as I checked into my room, I noticed something. A black Tesla parked in the lot. I froze. Could it be hers? Or was I just losing it? I rushed to my room, locked the door, and sat on the bed, clutching my phone like it was some kind of lifeline. That's when it buzzed. A new message. This time, no email. Just a text from an unknown number. It read, "You can't run, Ryan. It's already begun." I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. The walls of the room felt like they were closing in, and I couldn't tell if it was real or if they'd already gotten inside my head. Maybe that's what they wanted all along, to make me doubt myself until I couldn't tell the difference. I'm not sure how long I stayed in that room, but eventually, I left. I had to. I couldn't keep running forever, but I couldn't go back to my old life either. Now I live off the grid, moving from place to place, trying to stay one step ahead. But some nights, when it's quiet and I'm all alone, I swear I can still feel it. That faint vibration, like something inside me is still connected to them. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. But if you're watching this and you ever get an email from Neural Ventures or someone like Emily Hayworth, don't respond. Just delete it. Trust me, you don't want to know what happens next.